Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Mindplex podcast. Today's conversation is going to be very hot topic around a new book of Dr. Jeff Funk, which is about to be released, and it revolves on the topic of competing in the age of bubbles. And of course, we're going to tackle, guess what? The hottest bubble in town, which is the AI bubble. We're going to talk about other things as well, but I'm quite excited about this conversation. And welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I will, it's very hard to put you in a box. So I will try to introduce you to our listeners as I see you. And please, I will give you the opportunity to add to my introduction along the conversation. So you are an innovator and a thought leader who does not shy away to shed light on the most painful, inconvenient truths. And actually, that's how we met. We met when you drew my attention with a very insightful comment to one of my posts on, I think it was on LinkedIn. And then I thought, well, this guy has an uncanny ability to see through the smoke and mirrors and dispel myth and shed light on the truth. So I really became one of your avid readers and fans and followers. And okay, so I found out that you got a PhD at Carnegie Mellon. You are highly educated and you followed with an academic career. During your PhD, so you did actually a PhD while working in a semiconductors factory, and then went on to pursue this academic career, which took you to Asia in the end, to Japan, and then to the National University of Singapore, where eventually you settled. So, and along with teaching, you wrote numerous academic articles as one of the first to recognize that new technologies, rather than being like quickly spreading in the world, were in fact vastly overhyped. And you detail various facets of this in five books, including the Stanford University Press published Technology Change and The Rise of New Industries in 2013. And again, you were one of the first to recognize the potential for smartphones during the late 90s and early 2000s in Japan. And you worked with several companies in the telecom industry, among which Nokia, and you got also the NTT DoCoMo Mobile Science Award in 2004. I do not know exactly if your book Mobile Disruption was published around that time as well.
Yes.
And okay, that's so I assume that's what also contributed to your award. And more recently, I had the immense joy and honor to meet you in person this spring in Seattle at the George Gilder's COSP conference, where you, along with Eric Schmidt, Peter Thiel, were a keynote speaker and impressed me along with the audience. I'm sure you got many more fans there by displaying again your incorrigible pessimism at how the world malfunctions through big promises, small results. And through your talk, you took us on a ride proving with clear evidence and data, which was very sad to see, how hype and misleading narratives are hiding startup losses, declining tech, and falling science, and failing science as well. So, were you always a pessimist, Jeff?
No, I wasn't. When I was 13, we went to the moon. That so excited me, and that's a big reason why I majored in physics, and along with the success of Star Trek back then. And so after I got my physics, I worked in semiconductor factory, so I was very optimistic. And then I went to get my PhD at Carnegie Mellon and did look at the economics of robots. And so an element of pessimism kind of got in there. I realized that people had overhyped the robots. They never really did diffuse as fast as people thought, including myself. And then, as you mentioned, I was involved with the mobile internet in Japan. And I was a big optimist there. And my optimist proved right. I mean, people were telling me, no, what's going on in Japan doesn't matter. The rest of the world is different. The mobile internet won't take off. And of course it did eventually. through Apple, but it was the same kind of applications. It was the same kind of story. And my book, 2004 Mobile Disruption, talked about a lot of these applications that ended up succeeding. So I was this pessimist. I was this optimist. And, I knew it wasn't all fields. But then I went to Singapore in 2007. I started teaching this course in the economics of new technologies. And that's when my pessimism started, because I spent 13 weeks talking about the economics of all these technologies. So I covered all kinds of things, from all this IT related stuff, which we're still doing well because of smartphone and PDA, and not PDAs, the tablet computer, these types of things. But then I was also looking at nanotechnology and superconductivity and bioelectronics, kind of all these things. And I realized each year that when I updated the slides that a lot of things weren't getting better. And then I analyzed some MIT Technology Review's predictions. They've been doing predictions since 2000, almost every year. And I analyzed a bunch of them in about 2015. I realized that very few of them, 3 out of 40 of the first 40, had come true. So I began to realize that, well, there was a lot of hype. And then I began to notice all the losses, all the startup losses. And so I began to become a pessimist. And I particularly became very pessimistic about people who would say, there was some latest article and they would get all excited about it. I'd say, people have been talking about this for 20 years. There's nothing new here. There's nothing. If you look at the trajectory, the improvement trajectory, there is none. So I began to become this pessimist, and I began to say, no, it's not as simple as that. And I've continued that over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yes, and indeed, I mean, there's so much ignorance in the world, and now in this mirage world of a bubble, not of bubbles necessarily, but of buzzwords and marketing and all this stuff and inflating everything. We do not know. We cannot. It's hard to distinguish truth from false, and what is real, what is not, and therefore, it's very important to have this kind of scrutiny and more realistic approach. And therefore, I definitely salute, and not only me, but also your many fans and followers are saluting your work and your approach. And so now I understand, because, actually, when I met you in person, you are a very nice guy. I mean, you're not this grouchy pessimist, which, transpires in your writings. But of course, it's impossible not to be a pessimist in this world of lies, where, as we were talking before, at some point, is the lie that rules. So, and I think bubbles and the lie have and the mirage and these inflated expectations have a lot to do with bubbles. So tell us, what are bubbles? Tell us a bit them, how they work, their dynamics. You are the expert.
Well, there's a lot of different definitions, but I think the best description of financial bubbles comes from Robert Shiller, who won a Nobel Prize many years ago. He wrote his book, Irrational Exuberance, in 2000. And he talks about how about how these bubbles work, how initially there's a very positive narrative, there's some price increases. And the price increases cause everyone to get even more excited. Oh, you see? It's true. The price goes up more. You see, it's true. And it keeps going up and up. And everybody's saying, yeah, it's true. So everybody's focusing on the input. Oh, we've got more. The share prices have gone up. The valuation of startups have gone up. Everybody's talking about it. They're talking about inputs. They're not talking about outputs. And so my emphasis for my whole life has been on outputs. And actually, 20 years ago, most people were focused on focused on output. So what do I mean by outputs? Well, is there a market? Is there a market in terms of dollars for this new technology? Are the startups making money? Are there some happy customers? So early on, I became an optimist because, for example, with personal computers, people talked about how people were using Microsoft Word and being able to create documents faster than they did in the past with typewriters and secretaries. Spreadsheets. So you're able to do spreadsheets on the computer much better than you could before. So it's very important to focus on outputs in a bubble. Don't focus on inputs. Don't focus on how much money, how the share prices are going up, how the valuations are going up, how there's more startup, how there's more academic papers, how there's more patents.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on outputs. Focus on real economic output. Is there a happy customer who is paying for something? And they're paying for something because it gives them value. So you have to look for that.
So I would say outputs versus valuations. So yeah, that's quite an insightful perspective, and thank you for demystifying a bit how bubbles work and through these inflated financials and so on and so forth. So it seems to me that in this case, pessimism, as you use it, is a good antidote for bubbles. Are there any other ways in which we can stay sane inside the bubble? And of course, we are now in the AI bubble, but in general.
Well, the thing that's changed about bubbles since Robert Shiller wrote his book is that there's so many of them. So some people call them micro bubbles. So, in 2000, the dot-com bubble, 2008, the great big banking bubble. But now it's that there is so many. For years, people have been talking about delivery drones, fintech, blockchain, self-driving vehicles, solid-state batteries, EVTOLs, on and on. Then there's crypto, and the Metaverse and Web3 came and went very quickly last year. And AI has been around for a long time. I mean, when I was a PhD student back at Carnegie Mellon in the early 80s, that was the second AI bubble. So we were into expert systems. So I've looked at a lot of expert systems because a lot of people said they were going to reduce the cost of writing software for robots. So that got me interested in them. Now, of course, none of that really, expert systems never really took off, only in some specialized applications. But then since like 2012, so the last 10 years, ever since some of these books by Eric Ben Jolson, Andrew McAfee, we've been expecting all this stuff to happen. And initially I was optimistic. I looked at IBM Watson and I thought, well, it seems to be working. They're doing it. They're working with these hospitals. And then the Wall Street Journal came out with this negative article about IBM Watson. That died. But then there was Jeffrey Hinton, Turing Award winner, saying that in 2016, in 5 years, there won't be any jobs for radiologists anymore. That never materialized.
There was happen.
AI for criminal justice. There was AI for policing. There was AI for, finding image recognition of criminals. So there's been multiple, even among this third wave of AI hype that people would call it, compared to the first wave in the 1950s and the second wave in the 1980s. There's all kinds of waves in this third wave. Yes. And so generative AI is just the latest one. And so when I hear generative AI, I mean, I'm suspicious because all these other bubbles that people have been talking about over the last 5 to 10 years haven't worked out. So then I'm thinking, well, people are going to be skeptical. People are going to ask more questions. But no, right? They jump on the bandwagon. Universities release these numbers saying that, all these jobs are going to be lost. All these consulting firms say this. They said the same thing 10 years ago. All these consulting firms said that we'd have 16 trillion in AI, for an AI market by 2030. These academics are saying we're all going to lose our jobs from robots. And now they're doing the same thing. And everybody is jumping on the bandwagon. That's what saying, wait a minute. We've heard this before. Let's be a little more careful.
Yes, and there are a lot of myths running around with it's ChatGPT is sentient and so on and so forth. And of course, people are excited and therefore they feed the bubble, let's put it this way. And of course, if they invest, then the bubble grows. So are there any ways to help us evaluate things, not to get fooled by this? I mean, I'm telling you, I did my PhD in artificial intelligence. I was creating expert systems for diagnosis. That's a good application for expert systems. But of course, now we have much more computational capacity. And Therefore, the mirage is bigger. Of course, we know the technologies, they existed before, and it's not sentience yet. And we need much more theoretical advances in order to achieve sentience. And that's what we are working on also. Well, Dr. Ben Goertzel is leading such work, and he is the founder of SingularityNet, which is hosting our podcast. So actually, how can we stay truthful and not get fooled right now in the middle of this AI hype?
Well, again, you go back to the market. And if you look at the market size for AI software, it's still like 60 billion. Some people will say, oh, no, it's much bigger because they'll throw in all the hardware. And they'll say, oh, well, but if you look at all the NVIDIA hardware, there's a huge market. Well, that's like saying that the market for mobile phones is huge because a lot of people are buying base stations from Ericsson and Nokia and Motorola. Well, wait a minute. Look at the final market. Is there some value being created? And what we see here is that it's not clear. I mean, there's a lot of people using ChatGPT and other generative AI to do things, to do like send email, to write articles. But I say, well, does it have an impact on productivity? So when I talk about a happy customer, I'm talking about a customer that becomes more productive. And almost all of this discussion is about an individual and how they can write more articles, do more emails, and therefore they say, well, look how productive I've become. Now, but you want to focus on system productivity. You want to focus on where the system is. So what? You can write a lot of emails. Somebody has to read them then. We have too many email messages. We have too many articles. We have too many patents. We have too much written things.
Yes.
We need higher quality written stuff. And so it doesn't really help. So you have to look at the system, whatever the system is. So think about coding. So, okay, coders will say it helps me code faster. But the problem is that coding is not just about writing code and then it works. It's about writing code, debugging code, and there's very complex systems. It's not just one person doing this. It's individuals doing one part of it, but then those different parts have to interact. So we need to see applications where it helps a system work.
Yes.
And so that's where I really find a lot of really excessive hype about generative AI is that people don't look at the system. And there are some examples of good things. I'll come back in a minute where I'm optimistic, but a lot of it is not. A lot of it, people don't want to look at these things. They just want to say, oh, people can write better. And so some academics did this study. Oh, you can write a decent article with ChatGPT, and therefore it's going to improve the productivity years. But writing is not a significant output in our economy. I mean, yeah, there are people who write books and things like that, but no way ChatGPT. That's the high end. That's the ultra high end, right? That's the top 0.001% of people who really write books that people want to read. Those are very hard for ChatGPT to do. So, you have to step back and think, okay, what could it do? Can it help us make cars better or make appliances better? Can it help us construct buildings? Can it help us grow crops? Can it help us mine iron ore or something?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the answer a lot is no. I mean, maybe it can help us develop things. Okay, it can help us develop software products. Okay, I'm getting you there. Now I want to see the evidence that it's improving the productivity of some companies. I suspect that will emerge later. It's just going to take a long time because companies have to think through this. And that's why a lot of them have said to employees that you can't use this. They want to work it out. They want to fix it. That's going to take time. When I see some examples of that, I'll be very optimistic. But until I do, then I'll continue to be pessimistic.
So yes, so I understand, and I have many things to just briefly comment on your take here. So of course, I understand and I agree that we need applications grounded in reality and to see the results and how actually AI is changing lives in the world. That grounding, yes, it's very important. I also have to remark that actually, the concept of intelligence is very ethereal. esoteric, if I may. There's not a clear definition. The scientists don't agree. And having been in the field of artificial intelligence throughout my career, from my PhD and also as an academic, we did not elucidate it yet, in all these decades. And now we're getting into awareness and consciousness, other even more ethereal terms. And as such, it's kind of not such in the grounding is not in the immediate thing which comes to mind when you talk about artificial intelligence. That's why we need people like you even more for this kind of grounding. So your perspective, which is, I do not want to call it pessimistic, it's realistic. But I wanted to make another remark to what you mentioned about coding and proving that the code runs well. I think here, I do not want to call it necessarily artificial intelligence. It's simply coding, right? Because you can write routines, and this is what I wrote already from my master's thesis that was long ago, to verify code. And there is a company which I like a lot. It's called Runtime Verification, and actually we are working with them and with Cardano to prove that the code is actually running and it is running well. So I think that is an application where we can use coding. I mean, actually, automation. Let's call it like that to prove coding. But otherwise, I completely agree. And I would like to ask you, because you mentioned this inflated valuations and so on and so forth. So what is the status of VC funding in today's AI bubble and in general in bubbles?
Well, I think it's very hard not to be swept along because these valuations go up and people are asking how, what do you think? And if you say pessimistic things like I say, then people are going to dismiss you as an old crank. And so it's hard not to be swept along, but you just have to realize that it's probably going to come down because that's what we've had happen over the last 5-10 years is that all these bubbles have popped. This bubble, you can say, oh, eventually it'll all work out. Yeah, but it's probably not going to work out for those companies just because AI works out, and I always, my favorite example of this Amara's law that supposedly we always overestimate in the short term, underestimate in the long term. I say, well, what about Charles Babbage? He did all this great work on mechanical computers in 1870, 1880, or 1860, and his assistant, Ada Lovelace. Very smart people. But, there was no market for another 80 years. I don't like it when people talk about the potential. Oh, it has such great potential. Yeah, quantum entanglement and the Einstein-Rosenberg bridge, they all have great potential. But that doesn't mean they're going to happen soon. You have to understand if things are going to happen soon. So I talked a lot about, is there a market and is there happy customers? Is there improvements in productivity? But it's also, is there an improvement somehow in the technology? Is there an improvement? So you look back at the early days of the personal computers, and of course, people were talking about Moore's Law. They're going to get better. So that was very obvious. Even in the early days of e-commerce, when we first started using Amazon to buy books, we could see that there's rapid improvements in bandwidth. So we saw that websites were going to evolve from just text to pictures and video and other things, and that would enable all these other forms of e-commerce to emerge. So does that exist? So a lot of people say, oh, we're in the early days of AI. No, I mean, AI has been around for a long time. People talked about it for a long time, right? This is the third wave.
Yes.
And then and even if it's in the third wave, it's not new. Neural networks have been around for a long time. And the CEO of OpenAI said, well, we're not going to build any more big models. So there goes one of the big ways that improvements are going to occur. So I don't see big improvements happening. There'll be some, although maybe not a lot. It's hard to say. Recently, OpenAI announced that they will no longer offer their software for detecting whether something has been written in AI because they say it doesn't work well enough. Well, wait a minute. Isn't it supposed to get better? Right, and they said something about it was worked 75% of the time, and they produced some numbers. And there's other companies that offer this type of software. But all of this makes me suspicious because they're kind of saying, well, this is a lot harder than we thought. I'm saying, well, yeah, I'm certain there is. So we keep finding out that things are harder to do. And so I keep looking for, what's the facts in the situation and how hard is it to do? Because that's what I want to know. How hard is it to do? What kind of performance do we have now? What are we going to have in the future? What do customers want? These are the kinds of questions I think you need to be asking. People need to be asking.
Yes, of course. And OpenAI is not the only kid in town. Just wanted to say we are here as well. And it's not about bigger models necessarily, but it's about better models as well. And we have our own approach. And I would like to invite you. Of course, we did not release it yet. We are about to release it. I think it will be next year. Hopefully, it will surprise the world and take it by the storm. And I would like to invite you then also for like a clear appraisal of the future once we release the path to singularity. We are
Well, I
much more
agree
optimistic.
100% with your comments there. These small models are really important. And I've been a follower, a believer in what Andrew Ng has been saying for years. He has been talking about these small models, and he talked about the problems of people train it in there on some data, and then they go out to the hospital and it doesn't work right, and you really have to train it in the hospital. And so I think that you're going to see companies, and I think they're doing it right now. They're trying to improve processes, and they have data, internal data that they're going to use to improve, to train an AI model to help improve their internal processes. And I think that's exactly where the emphasis should be. And, less emphasis on all this big kind of hype conversation of, AI is going to improve productivity dramatically and put it everywhere. No, it's an existential threat. It's going to take over, right? We've allowed this conversation to become so broad and so big that it's meaningless. Get back to the small of just a company training AI on its internal data and improving its productivity. That's really where the future is.
Correct. And I see that you are moving towards the optimistic. You said you're going to mention the optimistic side and the more bright side of, let's call it still the bubble.
Okay, there's another example that I'm very optimistic about, and that is Hollywood. Because Hollywood for years has just redone things. I mean, you see a television series, and each episode is really not a big change from a previous episode. And they reuse a lot of their recordings. Yes. And on LinkedIn, you can see these people will post things about cartoons where they show that a cartoon from now, a recent cartoon, is almost the same as the one in the past, right? There's some underlying movements that are the same, and they've just changed some clothing and other things on the cartoon character. And it's the same thing with these episodes. And then even in movies, the popularity of these sequels and prequels, and there's a lot of books on how it's cheaper to make a sequel or prequel than it is to make a brand new movie. Well, it's because they're using old stuff, old recordings. And now AI allows them to do it a little more efficiently. I don't think it's something that's really that dramatically new, but that's why I'm optimistic about it, because they're able to just make it a little more efficient than they did before.
Indeed.
And so I see that happening.
Yes, and Stability AI, of course, yes, is working with Hollywood, and they showed a lot of. They increase the efficiency of movies because of their, the stunts were not done by real people; they were done by avatars and so on and so forth. So indeed, it can have applications for Hollywood. But I wanted just one thing to come back to one remark which you made when you mentioned Babbage, and because of Ada Lovelace, because we are here at the Mindplex podcast, Mindplex Community Podcast, and we have several Cardano listeners as well, and our token is called Ada. in honor of Ada Lovelace. So I just wanted to salute the fact that you went back to their work in what you in your remarks. If you wanted to add something more in that regard, please go on. Otherwise, I'm ready with my next
Well,
question.
the work they did was marvelous, and there was other people that followed up on Claude Shannon, and Boolean logic and information theory, and so these things are important developments in the whole evolution of the market. But remember that a lot of these things came long ago, right? So just
Yes.
because there's some scientific breakthrough or something, doesn't mean that the market is going to take off. Generally speaking, no. Generally speaking, it takes a long time for these things to happen. So you have to kind of understand the details of the market and what customers are willing to pay for, and then how expensive the technology is, how good it is. Those things are hard to do, but that's essential. You have to understand those things, and it's unfortunate that they get very little emphasis. I mean, I had my whole academic career was one big argument with the business school professors who said, no, it's not the technology, it's a business model. They don't care about this evolution. To them, it's like this technology, somebody reads a paper and then suddenly everybody develops something, right? Well, no, it's a whole string of papers that help improve the performance and cost over time. It's a very lengthy process. And if you really want to be somebody like John Doerr, who was a very good investor years ago, decades ago, then you have to understand these things.
So I do not know if we can get this answer to your question, because I don't know if you give this advice for free, but not as advice, but as a perspective. So from an investor perspective, what should we do about this bubble? Should we go all in? Should we watch? Should we invest cautiously, and in what? Or this maybe can be another conversation.
Well, yeah, I don't, the problem with investing is that it doesn't just depend upon how good the application is, whether it's going to be economical or all those things. It depends on what other investors are doing, right? It's very easy to make money by just investing, and then you sell out to the other fool, right? The greater fool theory. There's always going to be a greater fool than me who's willing to buy it for an inflated price. And I don't understand those things. Those some people are. Some people really know how much other people are willing to pay. And right now they're trying to figure out if the IPO market's going to open up again. And if it does, then people are going to be investing like crazy to then have those firms do an IPO. And so it's not just the common sense, the economics that I'm talking about in investing. Investing is about understanding what other people are going to do.
Totally. And before you move on, and sorry to bring you back to kind of with a pessimistic question, or maybe not necessarily, but I wanted to ask, what is your take about the talking town, which you mentioned, on the existential threat that artificial general intelligence poses? Do you think it's nonsense, or it makes sense? Because everybody, big organizations, European Union, I was now at the United Nations Artificial Intelligence for Good conference, in which they were talking, we need ethics in AI and to avoid this existential threat, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to know, what is your take on the existential threat, the potential for that?
Well, the problem is that somebody, all it takes is one person to hook up AI to do something when they shouldn't have done that. Somebody in the military does this. I think it's a low chance, because the military has a lot of safeguards and companies have a lot of safeguards, but still, it's possible. It's possible to do these things, and it's possible to ruin your company's reputation by putting out something that doesn't work. But in general, I'd say that it's very overblown, and I find the whole discussion about is AI going to be more intelligent than us? And and that's not the issue. The issue is whether it works for us, whether it improves productivity.
Yes.
It's not whether it's smarter than us. I mean, think about, but the society has become this way, where we're all trying to find the smartest person, and we give them all these tests, and then who's ever smartest gets into the next level of school and gets into Stanford and then gets into the top consulting firm. When there isn't just one way to measure intelligence. There's lots of ways to measure intelligence, and we need lots of different people. And for AI, it's about whether it works for us, whether it improves productivity. That's what the conversation should be about. How can it help us improve productivity, make people's lives better? Not about whether or not it's so smart or not, and whether it's smarter than humans and people trying to come up with a new Turing test. And it's kind of foolish, really.
But there is, now, yeah, you brought me to think about how actually I lost my orientation faculty. I mean, I remember driving before Google Maps, driving with a map on my knee and looking at it while I was driving and actually finding my way. Now I cannot, and in any other new place where I was going, and now I cannot do that anymore. It's really so. The question is, yes, it's becoming better than us at certain things, and it's wonderful. But will that also lead us to become dumber? What do you think there?
Lead us to what?
To become more dumber, like more stupid or less intelligent or whatever.
It depends
you
on
want
how
to
you use this. It depends on how you use Google search. If you just put things into Google search and you just accept the answer, any answer, then you are getting dumber. But if you think about things, there are things that I've always relied on Google search. I look at it and I say, what's the population of Australia? Number comes out. Okay, I believe that. Will AI but if I type in, will AI take off? I'm not going to look at the top response. And I think there's a lot of young people who are going to use AI to do their homework because their objective is only to finish the homework, only to write this paper. And that's not the objective from a societal standpoint. There is no value to this paper except the process of creating it and the process of the student thinking about the issue, trying to organize their thoughts, trying to understand the issue, and trying to put it down in a manner that adds value. And so it can make us dumber. I think that it's going to cause some kids to become smarter and some kids to become dumber. Some kids are going to realize, well, wow, I can rely on Google and ChatGPT for some answers, but I can't rely on for other answers. And a lot of answers I have to think about a lot more carefully. And I want to add something else there, is that schools have done this because they offer courses on all kinds of things. And some things, though, it's not so easy, right? You can give the laws of physics, you can give the laws of chemistry, but you're going to take an innovation class and they're going to tell you about a lot of simple things that don't mean anything. And the person is think, oh, I know innovation. No, innovation. They don't. I mean, I get people all the time doing this to me. They learned about S curves and a bunch of other very simple stuff, and they think they understand innovation, and they don't. And so our school system has done this. We've said that, well, you can learn anything, real quickly. You take a course on it and you learn it. And well, you can only learn things if they're actually known, right? So you can learn the laws of physics because we know them. We can learn laws of chemistry. But there's a lot of things that are a lot harder that I don't care how many courses, you offer courses and you may actually make things worse unless you tell people that, well, we don't really know. Because if you offer a course and people take the course and say, oh, I'm an expert.
Yes, I agree. And with the innovation, definitely I have experience and I cannot agree more with you. I mean, I've been on so many science, technology, and innovation councils around the world at very high levels. And I can tell you that we have architectures for like roadmaps for innovation that are, hundreds of pages, and I do not know if anyone can make any sense of it. And can't. Yeah, so I could not agree more with what you said.
Well, that brings me to another thing. There's a lot of people who think that all you need is a plan and then you develop the technology, right? President Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon in 10 years. And we went to the moon. And everybody says, see, all we have to do is have a plan. Well, he got lucky. We had all those rockets from Bernard von Braun and other people. We had the start of the information technology revolution. He got lucky. Most of the time, you can't do that. You have to look at what the technology is capable and whether it's going to be improved. And don't think for a second, well, but we're going to put in some money. Money, people have tried to do almost everything. Right? There's all these professors out there. They're trying all kinds of things. They've tried almost everything. Now, they haven't tried everything. If you can find something new, then yes, but for the most part, they have tried most things. So I don't care if you put more money into something. If it hasn't been improved over the last 10 years, the money probably isn't going to help. Now, if it's been improved, well, yeah, you put in money and you can probably get some continued improvements. But it isn't as simple of just saying, oh, we just got to put some money in this. And there's too many people that think the whole solution is money. All we got to do is put some money in it. And
everybody thinks that. Yes, at least in my world, I agree.
If we want more science and technology work better, we're going to have to do it differently. We're going to have to do it very differently. We can't just give more money to universities because all they're going to do is give us more academic papers. And we don't need more academic papers. We got 2 million a year. And I'll tell you, they're really hyper specialized. Most of them are really bad. A lot of them are written by paper mills in China or some other country. We don't need more of that. Right? Even the ones written by the president of Stanford weren't that good.
Exactly.
Right? And so we find this out.
I could not
We don't
agree
need more papers.
So that was definitely because we are both academic researchers, yes, and we witnessed the decay of the peer-reviewed games, which led to this abundance of easy marketable jargon and bubbles in the academic world, which is unbelievable and very disappointing. Yeah. So I know you wrote several articles in this regard. I don't know if you wanted to detail a bit more about that, or I can move on.
I wrote an article for American Affairs with Lee Vinsel and another fellow whose name escapes me in last November. That's about how we're not getting the innovation we want and how we need to do academic research differently, basic and applied research differently. So I've written a lot on that.
We will post the link to that, and also because that is also when is the lie that rules applies also to academia and to a journal like Nature. I mean, I really lost my faith in everything. I mean, really. So.
It is amazing that they don't do a better job. The reviewers don't do a better job. We need fewer papers and better papers. We need probably 1/10 the number of papers and just better ones.
So Stanford and journal Nature. I mean, what more can I yes, really, really disappointing. So, and I think we, I got kind of to towards the end of our conversation, but I wanted, as the last question, which I still have, and I'm not sure if I really understood exactly the punchline on this. So competing in the age of bubbles. We spoke about bubbles, but we did not talk a lot about competing. And so what is the competing aspect in the age of bubbles?
That's a good question. Well, basically, I've been looking at the economics of technologies for years, and I say we need to pay attention to those economics. So, I look at those economics and I'm pessimistic, but publishers don't like that kind of stuff. They don't want you to, they want a how-to book. So I got to have a how-to, right? So I got to tell them when to look at these economics and how to look at them. And so it's all about assessment. I mean, a lot of this competing is about positioning and partnerships. That's what these business schools have done, and platforms, and all these companies are doing this stuff, and they're not succeeding. So there's something else. And there's something else is that the economics of thinking about what the economics of a business is, and starting from an industry and thinking about what drives the cost, what do people want, what can change things. And let me give you an example. Please. Because I come across this all the time in AI. Think about insurance, and people are talking about how all these insurance businesses, and they're going to help us find lower risk clients. I say, well, how much is that going to affect the cost of insurance? You have to come up with a method that reduces like the number of fires or the number of car accidents, something like that. That's the only way, because that's what most of the cost of insurance is. Yes. It's not the cost of signing up people. It's the cost of paying out. right? So if you're going to reduce the cost of insurance, because this is what productivity is about, it's about reducing the cost. You're going to have to find a way to reduce the incidence of something. And this has happened in the past. People came with smoke detectors and they charged people, charged homes who had smoke detectors less money because they actually reduced the number of fires, right? So when I talk about economics of industry, I'm talking what drives the cost in the industry. Figure that out. Try to target that. Try to make that better. You know, in ride sharing, it's not about the cost of the driver. It's about congestion. Figure out how to reduce congestion. So you find what the pain point is. And by the way, everybody knows that about congestion. Man, I took a transportation policy class 40 years ago. The professor talked about it. I mean, a lot of these things people have known about for decades, but they get ignored by all these new people who've gone into entrepreneurship because, they want to get rich and they think it's really cool and on and on and on. And they don't really, and what they're good at is raising money because they're good at telling the story and being an evangelizer. But they're not good at thinking about the economics of industries, thinking about what really needs improvement, what technology could do that. That's the hard part. And we need more people like that.
Yes,
and that's
absolutely.
what I'm trying to tell. That's really the message of the book, is that we have to think about those things a lot better. You know, so just saying all these startups now realize they're losing money. They're going to all make money now because they pivoted. They're going to because they chose a bad business. Almost everything is decided when you choose your business. And then when you choose what you're going to focus on in the business, whether you're going to focus on, who the customers are and things like that. After that, after you made those decisions, you can't really make a big change.
True.
You can't really improve it. You can't really
to choose the right business. This is the subtitle of your book. So I really look forward.
Well, maybe that is. Maybe that's what the title should be: choosing the right business.
Yes, no, that is because this is a critical thing in the end. And I just wanted to thank you for this example with the insurance industry, because it shows all that. Yes, we need evidence-based. We need to look at the realistic parameters. And also another thing, so your example brought me to this quote, in the age of the intelligence machine, the only critical skill for success is the ability to ask the right question. And that was your example with the insurance industry as well. What do you
I agree with it. It's asking the right question, yeah.
Yes, and that is not an easy feat in the age of lies, when the lies in which the lie is ruling, and also when you have all this fakeness and fake news and bubbles. So I really appreciate your honesty, frankness, blunt truth. So we need more people like you who are looking at the evidence and are demystifying things, embellished things, and cutting the Gordian knots in order to clarify matters. We really need more people like you, and I really look forward to read your book, Jeff. Thank you so much for your time today and for your unique perspective on the AI bubble and on bubbles in general.
Thank you.